Welcome. I am Brenda Schroeb, one of the worship associates at Community Church of New York. And I welcome you on behalf of our ministry team, our staff, and all our lay leaders. It is good to be together, both in person and online. Community Church is a multi-generational, multiracial, multicultural congregation with a vision and commitment to build a world grounded in equity and inclusion. Today's worship team also includes Jerry Brown, our music director, Darnell White, our musician in residence, our choir, Errol de los Santos, our communications coordinator, Amy Wilson, our broadcaster, Reverend Chris Long, our minister for pastoral care and programming, and Reverend Peggy Clark, our senior minister. It's a gift that so many of us have access to vaccines, allowing us to live a little more freely. Those of us under the age of 12, and many of us who are immunocompromised, don't have access or the same levels of safety. In the spirit of welcome, we are asking congregants to keep masks on while we are indoors as we help to protect the most vulnerable among us. There are a few printed programs, but we are hoping most people can access the program using the QR code, which is in the vestibule. If you didn't get it, it can also be found on the printed program. Just use the code reader on your phone. For those watching from home, there should be a link available to you so you can access the program as well. When we do this, we save paper and the cost of printing, which makes our services more sustainable. Today's topic is Community Church, past, present, and future. Please rise in body or spirit, and let's sing together our opening hymn, We'll Build a Land. Hymn number 121 in the Gray Hymnal.
We'll Good morning. It's good to see you all, and it's really nice that people are joining us online as well. Hey, can I clear something up before we start? We're trying some stuff out. So there's this piece of paper that has the program on it and has the information that you need. The thing you use your QR code has all the announcements, and it's really pretty, and Errol made it look great. And if you're online, you can use that QR code and also get the program. So this is what you want. Today we're talking about community church, past, present, and future. We are in the midst of major transition. This is one of our last Sundays in our space, so we're doing a little history and we're doing a little forward thinking this morning. Let's begin. Remove the rigid overcoat of experience, the notion of knowing, the beliefs that cloud your vision. Leave behind the stories of your life. Spit out the sour taste of unmet expectation. Let the stale scent of what-ifs waft back into the swamp of useless fears. Arrive curious, without the armor of creativity. The plans, without knowing for sure what's going to happen next, without being certain of a life you have yet to imagine. Live the life that chooses you, new every breath, every blink of your astonished eyes. Let us do it together. Let us begin our worship. Our choir will lead us in our chalice lighting.
Show to us beauty, wisdom and joy. Rise up, O flame, but show to us beauty, wisdom and joy. Let's say our chalice lighting together. We light this candle, the flame of our heritage. May it ignite hope in our lives, in our community, and in the world. Our unison affirmation. Unto the Church Universal, which is the depository of all ancient wisdom and the school of all modern thought, which recognizes prophets are harmony, in all scriptures are unity, and through all dispensations are continuity, which adjures all that separates and divides, and always magnifies humanity and peace, which seeks truth and freedom, justice in love, and individual discipline in social duty, and which shall make of all persons one beloved community, unto this church and unto all its members, known and unknown throughout the world, we pledge the allegiance of our hands and of our hearts. Skies, let thy peace arise. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Let your song of praise be sung to every land and every tongue. Please join me in our land acknowledgement. We are gathered on the unceded land of the Lenape peoples. We acknowledge the Lenape community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. Community Church of New York also acknowledges that it was founded upon exclusion and erasures of many indigenous peoples. This acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacy of settler colonialism. At the heart of our shared spiritual path is community. Let us turn to one another and greet both our friends and all of those we have yet to meet. Ushers, will you please bring the prayer cards forward? What a sight to see everyone gathering. May I invite us now to start taking our seats. Our time for centering prayer. Spirit of life, love, Holy One, God. As we gather this beautiful morning, let us start to settle into this day and this time. As we start our time of silence, reflection, and communal contemplation, I'd like to honor that we are indeed in the middle of Hispanic Heritage Month. I wanted to prayerfully honor all of the contributions the Hispanic, Latino, Latina communities have and continue to make to the growth of this country for centuries. It is also true that although some of us are not hearing about what is happening for those seeking safe harbor at our borders, we know hundreds of Latinos, Latinas, and Hispanics, and now Haitians, are enduring unspeakable horrors that rest in our collective responsibilities, our responsibilities to address and to speak out about. Let us hold space in our hearts now for this reality. Regarding our gathered and virtual communities, there is yet joy for major celebrations, birthdays, joys, still hugging friends and family and loved ones anew. And the Delta variant and the lack of those able to or willing to get vaccines is impacting us all. The deep uncertainties of the possible end to this pandemic is still very much with us all. Additionally, some of us are dealing with new diagnoses and friends who are diagnosed with cancer. and other ailments. Some of us are dealing with the realities of ongoing isolation, the impacts of health issues, and the gifts and challenges of aging. Yet others are dealing with the loss of treasured pets. We hold these matters in our collective embrace now for our community prayer requests. Unvaccinated people. Continue thoughts and prayers for Aunt Lucille. Remembering Kathy Doyle and family on the loss of their beloved husband and father, Bill. I invite you to share in the shared closing for our prayer time together, printed in your program. They read, "All these joys, griefs, and hopes, both spoken and unspoken, be held in prayer. Amen."
Please join me in our shared words before the reading. Truth and wisdom are found in many places, from many sources. May we be open to it always. Today's reading is by James Baldwin from Nothing Personal. For nothing is fixed forever and forever and forever. It is not fixed. The earth is always shifting. The light is always changing. The sea does not cease to grind down rock. Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have. The sea rises. The light fails. Lovers cling to each other, and children cling to us. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us, and the light goes out.
Paul and Silas, bound in jail, had no money for their bail. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on, hold on. Paul and Silas began to shout. Jail door open and they walked out. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on, hold on. Freedom's name is mighty sweet.
every once in a while a song is like, for you. I just feel like, yeah, I needed that one. All right. We are entering a period of transition here at Community Church. If anyone would like to stand up and laugh out loud at that statement, please go right ahead. I actually read that to myself in my office right before this and thought, was I kidding? This church has been in transition for years. I mean, there was a long time senior minister here who went through the process of retiring. You had an interim minister, process of a search committee and finding a minister and calling a new senior minister. And we're like 8 months into that, and it felt like, okay, things are settling. And then there's a pandemic and everything shuts down and we go online, and right, it just doesn't stop. So this idea that we're like entering a period of transition is a little off the mark. Nonetheless, that's where I'm starting. We are coming to the last few Sundays in this building, after which we're going to worship across the street, maybe for just a little while, maybe a few months, maybe 5 years. We don't really know. We will be there until there's something better. Our offices and our gathering spaces will be gone. We're going to exist largely on the top 2 floors of number 24 over there, and we'll exist in cyberspace until our new home has become quite apparent. It feels dramatic. It feels frightening. Honestly, I can't help but think a little bit about Moses leading his people through the desert for 40 years, right? I think when he started that journey, was he able to say, it'll be about 40 years? Or was he like, I have no idea what's about to happen, let's just go, because that's me. And even those of us who are really excited about whatever it is that's next, this transition is awkward and uncomfortable. But when we look at our 200 years of history, I have to say, this transition, not all that important. This church has weathered some pretty difficult and interesting storms. We were founded in 1825 with an opening sermon by Reverend Channing himself. For those who don't know, he kind of sparked the whole Unitarian movement, and he showed up and started us off. We had been sparked by All Souls, but were founding ourselves, creating ourselves as independent. Our pews were filled by New York's most fashionable. And then we hit some hard times. And in 1848, Reverend Osgood was called to this pulpit. But interestingly, Reverend Osgood didn't like Unitarianism. I have to say, who was on that search committee? But he didn't believe in Unitarianism, and the members voted him out, as well they should. And here's an interesting piece of information. He didn't leave. 13 years. 13 years. Last year I told a story that I stayed in a job 2 years after deciding to leave. I thought that was a long time. 13 years this guy stayed in this pulpit, not liking Unitarianism, but apparently having nowhere else to go. Finally, when he left, the church was in serious debt. The next minister, I guess the search committee didn't pick up the cues the first time, next minister didn't like Unitarianism either. And he, on a Sunday morning, got up here in the pulpit and tried to convert the entire church to Orthodox Christianity. The New York Times wrote it up. They called it an extraordinary scene. The members ousted him too. The next minister stayed all of 2 years, and on his way out declared very publicly that this church will never be a useful religious body. The next few years were equally tumultuous, with ministers coming and going. The church was sinking deeper into debt, to the point of thinking that we were going to close. And what kept us open really were just some very generous gifts. All Souls sent us a whole bunch of money. The women's group, which I hear has now been reignited, the women's group raised a small fortune. The denomination sent some money to keep the doors open. Without this sudden, generous influx of money, this church would have been an interesting note in the history of All Souls Church, the original progenitor. And there have been other changes. We opened our doors on the corner of Prince and Mercer. We sold that building and bought another further uptown on Broadway. We sold that building and bought or maybe built another on the corner of 34th and Park. After that one burned down, we spent decades meeting at City Hall while raising money to build the church we are currently in. We changed our name. In nearly 200 years, we've been known as Second Congregational Church, then the Church of the Messiah, and now Community Church of New York. We were Christian when we started, shifted later to being what was called unorthodox Christian, which is not an uncommon term for a handful of liberal churches. And then we joined the community church movement, which took us out of the Christian line and onto this multi-denominational track. We rejoined the Unitarians just as they were joining the Universalists, having caught up to a wider way of thinking. And none of this was easy. None of it is without anxiety. I'm sure every single one of those changes, every move, every vote, every new location and name was met with a cadre of people angry about it, and while I don't have any numbers, I'm guessing people left over it. And here we are again. We're making hard choices, we're facing difficult decisions, we're opting for change. I am not one who pretends things are rosy when they're not. Community Church is in a difficult spot. Once the largest community church in the movement and the second largest Unitarian church in our history, we have lost hundreds of members over these last decades, dropping from a high of over 1,600 people to fewer than 200. And while we have plenty of money in the bank, the cost of these aging buildings is suffocating. So we're making some hard choices. But we're doing it really before the crisis fully hits us, right? We're still solvent, we still have plenty of members, we have competent, stable leadership, we have options. And in some ways, that makes it just much harder to change, right? When you start laying people off or shutting off the heat during the week to save money, it's easier to convince people that something has to give. Instead, we have members with foresight and courage who've been working hard for a long time to ensure that we never find ourselves in quite those dire straits. Because of their proaction and because of your support of a new vision, we're taking this really difficult step of letting go of our building, of all of our buildings, and entering a period of transition and reimagining a new community church. So how long? How long is this transition? I don't know. I gotta tell you, a week ago I thought I knew better than I do right now. I'm gonna say a few months, maybe a couple of years, maybe 4 years, could be 6 years. Whatever it is, it's going to feel like a long time. Even if, we're in our new space of some kind and settled in the spring, it's gonna feel like a long time. Transition feels like that. This might be a blip in the history of this institution, but in a single human life, it's significant. And it's going to be easy for any of us to leave community church, and I suspect some people will. Some will say that you don't like afternoon worship, which we're going to have for a little while, or they don't like the church across the street because we're going to be over at Church of the Incarnation. They're going to say, I don't like what you did. I don't like that you sold that property. I don't like the focus on technology, a shift toward younger families or children or any of the things that we're starting to do. New music that we're bringing in, people are going to say, I don't like it. Some people will say, I'll be back when things settle down, and they might. And you might expect me to make an argument for any of those people to stay, but I'm not going to. I think everyone has to take care of themselves. If you're not in a place where you can be here, where you can be present to what's happening, where you want to be part of this transition, part of this shared faith, part of this moment in the life of this church, I think you should do what you need to do. We're only going to get through this if we're true to ourselves and to each other. There will be no blame, no finger pointing, and everyone will be welcome back with arms wide open at whatever point that feels right. Those of us who stay through this transition, and I'm hoping that's nearly all of us, we're going to need to be flexible and creative. We're going to have to be willing to try things out. We've done this before, right? Through 200 years of history, this congregation has weathered quite a few storms and fires and insolvency. We've had first-hand experience for these last 18 months. I mean, if I had told you in February of 2020 that we were moving our church online to Zoom, which lots of people hadn't even heard of yet, you would all have told me that that's the end of community church. But we did it, and we did it without a moment's notice. And we immediately, within a week, we were a 7-day church, alive and well, through one of the most trying times in the city's history. So we'll get creative. We'll see what hybrid church looks like with some people in the room and some people online. We'll live stream events and worship and meetings. We'll gather at different times in a variety of locations. We'll keep our eyes on each other, always loving, always caring for those who are suffering in our midst. That's what we do. And we're doing that because what's next will be worth the pain of waiting. Community church is poised to become, again, a powerful force in New York City and in Unitarian Universalism. And it's not just about our building, but about our mission, which is increasingly necessary in this world. One of the greatest legacies of this church was the ministry of Reverend Haynes Holmes. As one of his successors, I think often about the world he dreamed about and how he set me up to continue his work of building a society grounded in nonviolence, racial, and economic justice. In some way, he was a creature of his time. He held on to fairly traditional gender roles. I've often complained about him leaving his wife and kids at home. He spoke with this really interesting accent. Apparently it was a common accent for educated professionals and dramatic speakers in the early and 20th century, which is a little tidbit I picked up when Errol found a little voice recording of his. But in far more ways, Holmes was unusual. He took seriously the liberal theology generally called the social gospel, written in the late 19th century. It calls on people of faith to shift their eyes from questions of personal sin and onto sinful social systems that make up our society. Stop worrying about lusting after your neighbor's wife and worry instead about the lust for power your nation has on the lust for power that your nation has. And start worrying about the covetous eye they have on some smaller nation's natural resources. Holmes defined the life of the activist minister for Christians everywhere while also embodying an interfaith life. He partnered with a local rabbi, Stephen Wise, one of his closest friends, and then he was open. He opened his own church to this really broad understanding of itself as a community church. He was seeking what was considered radical inclusion by asking himself the question, who are our neighbors and how do we welcome them all? He supported women's reproductive rights while understanding that a woman, Margaret Sanger, was the leader of the movement, and it was his job to let her lead. He co-founded the NAACP, while understanding black members were the ones to define the mission and ministry of that group. He supported a transformative labor movement, again in an active, passionate, supportive role, putting workers at the front of the line so their voices were heard best. This is all part of our legacy, and it will propel us into whatever is next. This nation is hurting. The city itself is in a defining moment, one we seem to find ourselves in every few decades, and which we seem to recover from, often quite beautifully. We could say the same thing about the nation, but I'm frankly less confident about the grace with which we're going to recover. Between radical economic disparities, intentional threats to our democratic systems, and the speed of climate change, tensions are running really as high as they were in the 1850s. What seems most clear to me is that communities like ours will be increasingly necessary in the years to come. And we need to be on top of our game. Covenanted congregations, people of faith who've committed to partnership, shared leadership, and genuine care with and for each other are required. Unitarian Universalism is necessary in this world and in the world to come. Our message is our salvation. But we here at Community Church haven't been living into our greatest potential in recent years. In the next few weeks, we're taking the massive steps to turn another page and begin a new chapter. It's exciting, and it's terrifying, and it's complicated, and it's liberating. We are the next chapter. In 100 years, when someone else is preaching from this pulpit, they're going to tell the story of the congregation that could see the future, that supported a big vision and made the sacrifices to see it to completion. It'll be another turning point in a long line of turning points. This, what we're doing right now, this will become part of our story. And you will all become part of the story. It is your voices that will be heard. It'll be your pictures that people will observe in masks and in gratitude. They will see you as the ancestors for their generation. And the way I know that they're going to hear your voices is that a group of leaders and staff have been recording them. Those are the voices, right? We're creating this digital archive, the stories, the people, you, this congregation, who will be leading us into whatever's next for this groundbreaking community of faith and love. And because it is your voices, I am going to play just a tiny bit of what we have recorded. These are your voices. It starts out a little quiet.
Hello there, Jill. My name is Eric Coleman.
Okay. My formal name or my, street name?
Oh, you have a street name?
Yeah.
Whatever you choose to go by. Today.
Fred Corton.
Jeanette Juanita Gilmore.
I've been at Community Church for 41 years. I came here in about 1980. Well, my first visit here was to attend a memorial service with a friend for his father. So that was my first visit to the church. And I started coming there after, and I've been here ever since.
1979, I lived in the community at 105 East 38th Street, and the Zagans were in my apartment building, and they said, you should get out, go to Community Church. They have rummage sales, they have services. We're Jews, but we have the Metropolitan Synagogue, but it's intergenerational, and it's a wonderful opportunity to meet people. So I listened to them, and I came to Community Church.
My lady friend was a member here in the 1960s, the mid-1960s. She was part of the Black political caucus that they had here at that time, and brought in some of the fine thinkers and speakers of that era. Anyway, we once had an annual Christmas dinner here that was served on Christmas Eve. And under Reverend Harrington at that time, I came.
This actually goes back to childhood. Donald Harrington was the senior minister at the time, and he was a very imposing man. I mean, he was very tall. He spoke in deep patrician tones, and things were more formal, and he preached wearing a morning coat well into the 1970s.
So Father Matagasama came to us in 2007, and it turned out that what we were supposed to do was get a family and help the family. So we got this family of this woman and 6 children who were living in a shelter. So would I have had that opportunity without this church?
And kids who grow up in the Unitarian Universalist Church are amazing. They're intelligent. They're confident. They're creative. And they're marvelous. And that's what I hope for our church, is that we grow children.
And that's what I hope for Community Church too.
Thank you. We're on our way. Life at Community Church is busy, whether we are online or in person. It is our hope that wherever you are and in whatever way you are comfortable engaging in the mission and the ministry of this church, we have provided opportunities for you. There has been a significant development in our contract negotiation, and we need to have a congregational meeting after worship today to keep you all informed. About 15 minutes after we're done with the service, we'll regather in this space so that Jonathan Burchell, our chair of the board, and Reverend Peggy Clark can update us. This meeting will also be live streamed, so if you're at home, you can still join us. We are a 7-day church, and most of our programming happens on Zoom. If you'd like to connect with other UUs, check the website and your program for the schedule. Every Sunday, we pass a basket to support the many ministries of our congregation. Our spiritual home thrives as a result of our generosity of time, talent, and treasure. We receive these gifts in gratitude. Will the ushers come forward? Thank you.
Please speak the extinguishing chalice words with me. Knowing how quickly the flame of truth may be extinguished, how easily the chalice of fellowship broken, let us be vigilant in faith, keep peace in our hearts, and make care for one another, watchword of our lives together.
So our light goes out everywhere into the world. Our light goes out into the world, bringing healing and hope to all the places it's needed. Let us go in peace to love and serve the world and one another.